Sometimes, when you're playing a game, you encounter an individual that at first seems rather mundane and boring, and in this case is but a way to immersively give your name to the game. However, as time goes on and subsequent sequels are released for that game, the character makes infrequent cameos in a bunch of quests. One such character is the now infamous Saint Jiub of the Elder Scrolls series, or as he prefers, Saint Jiub, the Eradicator of the Winged Menace, a Dunmer male that has somehow managed to transcend his humble bonds and in the process become not only an integral part of the Elder Scrolls lore, but an iconic figure in the Elder Scrolls community. So today, let's explore the origin, life, and mythos of the legendary Saint Jiub. Roll that intro. To start, let's go back to where it all began. Well, for Jiub at least. Turns out our soon-to-be saint of the tribunal, and resulting new temple that was to come, was a skooma addict. Living his days as a freelance assassin in the wild wastes of Third Era of Ardenfell, only ever taking jobs to feed his addiction to skooma. Jiub's life of skooma and Sujamma ended, however, when he was paid to assassinate a high-ranking House Redoran official. Little did he know that at the time, the Morag Tong had been paid to assassinate the very same individual that he had. And through a twist of fate, Jiub was used as a cover by the obviously more experienced assassin, ending with him being caught by the authorities, who assumed that he was the one who killed the target. This irony was not left unnoticed by the saint himself, though, as when asked about his life before he returned to the Isle of Ardenfell, he has these things to say.
I finally bit off more than I could chew. I was paid to assassinate some high-ranking official from House Redoran. What I didn't know is someone had hired the Morag Tong to kill him as well. Exactly. He got to my target first and called the guard to cover his tracks. By the time I got there, the place was on alert. Walked right into a trap and didn't even realize it until I was captured. They tried me for murder, threw me on a prison ship, and sent me to the jail in Vivek City. Gave me a lot of time to think, that's for sure.
As he goes on to say, Jiub, upon being accused and tried for his supposed crime, ultimately ended up being transferred to an imperial prison in Cyrodiil. As to why, no one can really tell. However, it appears that the ever-influential Uriel Septim VII saw something in the two of the prisoners in his jails, and like many times before, he chose to let them go. This would result in not one, but two legends being born, with one, the one of Jiub obviously, being much more prolific than the other. These two prisoners would end up being, as previously hinted, Jiub and of course the soon-to-be Nerevarine. An event that would lead to the most iconic scene in all of Elder Scrolls history, the infamous line Jiub said to the other prisoner.
Stand up. There you go. You were dreaming.
In fact, this event is well remembered, verbatim even, for obvious cameo-esque means, by Saint Jiub later on in the Soul Cairn.
Now, what was it I said to that prisoner? Stand up. There you go. You were dreaming. Yes, that was it.
As the story goes, the other prisoner would journey to Balmora, as per the Emperor's decree. But Jiub? Well, Jiub would be left to go free, most likely with the Emperor having known what would come of him as well. It's here that we can jump into the famous memoirs of the saint himself, which in all honesty are blatantly exaggerated. But let's humor the Dunmer's final words for a few moments. It appears that after departing the ship that had brought him back to the Isle, Jiub felt that the, quote, dark times in his life would ultimately not mark his destiny, and as such, in the Dunmer's own words,
After I was freed from prison, I decided to turn my life around, give something back to the people of Morrowind. It became quickly apparent that the best way I could help would be by wiping out the cliff racers.
However mundane it sounds in his own words, the memoirs managed to do the exact opposite, with the simplest of details receiving equally as grand exaggerations. In fact, that portion that Jiub just described went something like this in the memoirs. I am a hunter. I am a redeemer. I am Jiub. Right off the bat, Jiub already describes his tale with heroism, but let's not dawdle on this point. The tale of my rise to glory begins in the ash wastes of Morrowind. I rode alone, weapon at my side, and the burning wind stinging my face. My quest was arduous, but necessary to ensure the survival of the Dunmer people. A pestilence was creeping across the ashlands, a menace with an insatiable hunger that plagued innocent travelers simply trying to get home. It was my self-sworn task to hunt them down, one by one, and drive them from the skies. Their fury knew no bounds, and their war cry resonated across the land. They were the notorious cliff racers, and they had to be destroyed. With that, I think it more than sufficient as to the type of rider that Jiub was. Though the Ashen Waste were treacherous, cliff racers, no matter the annoyance they posed, were in no way a dangerous opponent, especially for any battle-experienced traveler. Nevertheless, Jiub's feat was nothing short of a miracle. To single-handedly wipe out the whole of the cliff racer species is impressive, and deserves all the praise that Jiub receives. As such, Jiub finishes his memoir with these lines, following a rather grand battle he had with multiple cliff racers, of course. Suddenly, I understood everything. Suddenly, I realized that I was brought here for a reason. I should have died in those ash wastes, but Lord Vivek must have seen something inside me that he hadn't seen in millennia and decided to spare me from my fate. Thus began my ascent to sainthood. Thus began the rise of Jiub. From here, Jiub would systematically wipe out nearly every cliff racer in all of Morrowind, including both Vardenfell and potentially any that had strayed to other parts of Morrowind. This effort was also greatly helped with the death of Dagoth, and hence the clearing of the Ghost Fence, with the final result being the crowning of Jiub as a savior by not only the Tribunal Temple, which at the time was slowly dispersing as per Vivek's own orders, but also the new temple that came from those ashes. This fame would only grow as time went on, and Jiub would become celebrated all throughout the Empire of Tamriel. This fame eventually convinced Jiub to leave his ancestral home in Morrowind, journeying to Kvatch only a few years before the events of Tes-4 Oblivion. Jiub's real purpose was to find a quiet place to write his memoirs, or as he referred to them as, epics. Tales that would not only highlight his legend, but increase it. This, however, was tragically cut short, and as the Oblivion crisis loomed, our fateful hero would die, writing what he believed to be his grand epic. His death would send shockwaves throughout Cyrodiil, and would result in the contortion of his legend, with many believing that Jiub had died somewhere in Morrowind. When asked about his death in the Soul Cairn, it seems apparent that Jiub, at least initially, doesn't realize that he is dead, and instead believes that he had simply been trapped by the Daedra that had, in truth, killed him. This is further explained in his responses when asked about his death.
Well, I assume so. It cast a spell at me from some kind of strange black crystal. Next thing I knew, I arrived here. My what? Wait. That means... No. All these wasted months, or has it been years? I don't even remember how much time has passed. No, my work will never see the light of day. My name will be forgotten.
This was not his end, however, as Jiub was soul-trapped by the treacherous Daedra, and ended up becoming a prisoner of the Soul Cairn, hence the reason why we were able to ask him all these questions in the first place. Specifically, these events take place in the Dawnguard expansion of Skyrim, with Jiub being but another soul in the Soul Cairn. However, the appearance of the last Dragonborn finally convinces him of the fact that he is truly dead. Well, in the conventional sense at least. A sudden revelation then leads the Saint to ask the last Dragonborn to help him with his final wish.
Perhaps. Do you have a way out of here? Maybe I can't leave, but my writings can. In order to write the second volume of my opus, I need the notes from my first volume. Otherwise, I need to do all of this from memory. When I was tossed in here, I felt myself falling, and I dropped the pages I had been holding. There were 10 of them in all. Find them for me, please. I beg you.
From here, the last Dragonborn, if they so choose, can decide to help Jiub, traveling to dangerous locations in the Soul Cairn to gather the various scribblings of the Saint, with the quest ending with Jiub thanking you, giving you both his locket and a full copy of his opus, hoping that your character will be able to return it to the mortal realm. At the same time, Jiub also mentions how your character should stop by sometime, as Jiub has plans for an oncoming second opus, hence showing us that perhaps his story is not quite over yet, and that Jiub, even in death, may surprise us. Though I think it should be noted that despite all he has done, Jiub seems to display quite an eccentric personality, at least after the first time we meet him in Morrowind as the prisoner. But this behavior managed to lead him to quite the satisfactory destiny, despite all the hardships he went through in his early life and his afterlife. With Jiub's tale concluded for now, I think it best to pose a question to be answered someday in another video. One that involves a tale of regret, bonds, and retribution. The tale of how the Tribunal covered up Indril Nerevar's death. The tale of 3 gods with one terrible sin. But that is a story for another time.
I'm sick again, and I feel like I'm Nerevar. Niggas think they tough up when I pull up. Niggas never hard. Niggas think they legend till I pull up with a better card. Niggas think they fresh until I pull up with a dread card. Ooh, flex is so much like I'm the dread guard raider. I'm the liberator. Go, my haters are those fake yeezys. Bitch, you broke. See you later.